Hello and welcome. On behalf of all the colleges at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, I am Shannon Gibson, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to a presentation on AI in the aviation and aerospace industry. This is a collaborative effort of the industry advisory boards across the entire campus to bring you information about what's current, what's new, and how industry is utilizing this cutting-edge technology that you need to know about. So without further ado, I will hand off to a member of my advisory board, Chandresh. Please introduce your guest and take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Chandresh Mulkani. I am a graduate from Riddle. I graduated 20 years ago. I never had this opportunity, what you guys have as a panelist. So definitely take the most of it. Ask questions to the esteemed panelist. Real quick in terms of what the structure is going to be. As you guys know, AI is what the future is. There is a lot of conversations going on in AI in all industry, especially when it comes to aviation and aerospace. Anyway, from customer experience to operational resiliency, airlines and manufacturers, they are using AI. We have our esteemed panelists from manufacturing company as well as from airlines. I'll turn it over to them in shortly. We are going to talk about the general myth of an AI, what really AI means, because people use the term AI in a very different ways. So we're going to talk about what AI really means. We're going to talk about the use cases, what we are seeing in aviation and aerospace. And then we get into what is the future of AI, what we see, what we expect to see in the future by the time you guys graduate. What should the faculty be doing for the next few years and many more years to come? So please make this an interactive session. We have a set of questions I'm going to go through, but I encourage you guys to come up with questions as we go through the discussion so that you can have your questions ready towards the end. Okay. With that said, I'm going to start from my right, and then we're going to go forward to your right, Tim. So from an introduction point of view, two questions. Give us your background. And when I say background, talk about your name, your company, how did you get into this field? And second is explain AI in simple terms to students. So what is the overarching concepts and what are the different building blocks to an AI?
Sure. My name is Tim Nisnik, and I'm with American Airlines. How I got into this business was through an internship. Actually, I had an internship with American Airlines 25 years ago, and I never left. So internships are good. So take advantage of them. You learn a lot, and you never know where they'll lead. My background is operations research. That's what I went to school for. And so it was all about optimization. It was all about simulation. And about 10 years ago, this kind of burgeoning field of data science started coming on the horizon. And so as an analytics kind of minded professional, dove right into it and have just been thoroughly kind of engrossed with the possibilities and potential. But to me, and what I tell my team, so I lead an analytics team and a data science team at American. And, a lot of us come into this already kind of with an analytics background. And really, AI is nothing that is incredibly new. It's basically advancing on top of foundations and principles that we already knew, statistics and probability and data. But it's able to do things with that are new and innovative and novel, particularly around prediction, and how do you take advantage of large sets of data to actually learn from them in a systematic way, to understand them and not only learn from them, but also use that to make predictions in a systematic way, in a way that go beyond just traditional kind of classifier or regression models, but actually start to extend that beyond what was previously capable. So really, that's kind of my background. I'll turn it over to Steve.
Yeah, so hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Steve Olson. I'm with JetBlue Airways. I lead our System Operations Center up in New York. I am not a data scientist, but I've had the unique experience and privilege to work with a lot of smart people, Tim, one of them, that have helped my teams in the airline operations center be able to do their jobs better and ultimately drive a better experience with our customers. When you look at the opportunity, at least within commercial aviation, it is a really complex puzzle. Like, it quite frankly amazes me that we do anything right, because there are so many things that have to happen just to get a flight out on time. And what's also interesting is that, I mean, this year from an on-time perspective, the North American carriers are largely doing pretty well. I think our A14, the way in which we measure on-time performance, to be within 14 minutes of scheduled arrival, is north of 80%, which is fantastic, historically speaking. And we pat ourselves on the back when we say, hey, yeah, we've got A14 of 80% across the industry. Well, that kind of failure rate in any other industry would be just absolutely unacceptable. I mean, imagine if 1 out of every 5 times you turned on your TV, it just didn't work, or you tried to start your car and it didn't go anywhere. Yet within the field of commercial aviation, that is about as good as we've been able to get it. And so what that speaks to is opportunity. It speaks to just the fact that we live in a world that has a lot of constraints. There's a lot of different pieces to this logistics puzzle that we call getting a flight from one place to another. A lot of those internally within the airline itself, and a lot externally, when you look at weather, ATC, or some of the other challenges that we have. And the ability for airlines to be able to synthesize all of the different kind of complex pieces that add up to that puzzle that then drive the product in which our customers bought and expect, which is an on-time flight. Being able to identify and look over the horizon at issues and challenges and things that are going to get in the way of that experience and from that product, being able to be delivered as advertised, is where I see a host of opportunity and where we've been able to actually lever a lot of the tools and capabilities that Tim just described.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joseph Matthews. I'm from United Airlines. I've been with the company now 24 years. Time flies. Very similar to Tim, I have an OR background, although I started as a mechanical engineer. But I had a friend who was doing OR, who was working at United, who pulled me in, and I've been there ever since. I would say AI, similar to what Tim mentioned, we've been actually doing this for a long time. It's just been in another name. Both in the ops world and especially in my case for the last 10, 12 years in the commercial world, there is a lot of stuff we do with data. One of the nice things about working in an airline, there is a ton of data out there. The neat part is the kind of stuff that we do to actually tie all that together, not just on the commercial side, but commercial and operations stuff together. And we've been doing that with ML modeling, stats, OR for a very, very long time. It's more recently that we've now started talking about the AI side or the Gen AI side. It creates a lot of opportunities for us, but I would say also it's, to many sense, it's like another tool that we have to learn as the scientists and as the data scientists in the space. But because it's an airline and as they mentioned, it's a very complex environment that we work in. And so that makes it a lot of fun to actually deal with both the real complexities when you actually put some of that science and math to it as well.
Just one follow-up. You mentioned Gen AI. Could you explain to the audience what is AI versus Gen AI?
Yeah, so that's a very difficult question. Thank you, Chandresh. So as I mentioned, I think my personal belief is we started with AI with ML concept, machine learning concepts, and even heavy statistics world a long time ago. As you sort of move into more automated ways of getting into the analysis and getting insights from it, that's where I think is what everyone sort of thinks high level as AI. And then, of course, in the last 2-3 years, now we've been hearing about the generative AI. I think generative AI is very, very new. It's also very scary, as you guys can probably say. And, 80% is great, but 99.99% on the safety side is very cool. And we should get even better on the aviation side. That's where it's a little bit scary to say, hey, how high and how fast we dive into the Gen AI side. But there's some opportunities there as well. Maybe we'll have some time to explain that as well.
Kevin Andrick, I'm here from L3 Harris, so I'm more of on, I guess, the DoD or military side of things. Sorry, hopefully people can hear me now. So I'm mostly on the military side of things. So
I'm the chief AI and autonomy and data architect for L3 Harris. I graduated with a PhD in electrical and computer engineering. Started my background in a lot of robotics, artificial intelligence. I'm probably dating myself when I say that when we were talking about artificial intelligence, we were just discussing more of the, would an artificial neural network actually work in real practice, because we didn't have the compute power in order to perform some of those techniques until backpropagation came along, and a lot of the compute that we have available today that we could actually prove out some of those technologies. So, mainly my role is to kind of shape the strategy and also the technology that we have. So I work with a lot of bright people at L3 Harris, but I really enjoy kind of, I'll say, fighting for the warfighter, making sure that they have an asymmetrical technology advantage when they go out into the battlefield. So we want to make sure that our warfighters have the best, capabilities available to them, and that's what I go to work for every day to help that. And so certainly when we talk about AI, that's certainly become a big part of how we can deliver some of those capabilities to our warfighters. Some of the earliest technologies we've delivered, people here may have heard of Project Maven. If you think about it, it's kind of an automated analyst. So, we have a lot of sensor technology that brings in tons and tons of data, gigabytes, terabytes of data. So how do you sift through all that data to find the threats that are amongst, the haystack, that pin in a, needle in a haystack? Project Maven allows us to have that accomplished, where we don't have to have dozens of analysts. We just have to have maybe one or so that can look through what has been highlighted by the AI technology.
Sounds good. So let's shift to the AI in your organization. So question maybe for you, Tim and Joseph, specifically to American Airlines and United. Could you talk about what is it that you guys are doing within your companies? Let's talk about some examples that is tangible to the students here.
Sure, I can. So my background, my area is operations, much like Steve, and so there's a lot of AI that's being used right now in the revenue management, side of the business, about how do you set prices, how do you set different fare classes. There's a lot of AI being used to develop schedules. Where do you fly? How often do you fly? What size aircraft? Lots of those to try to predict demand. Where's demand going to be? But in my world, it's all about operations. And so one of the biggest challenges I have, so we have 6,000 flights a day. And so that's a huge operation. And we fly to 11 different major hubs, and lots of other, hundreds and hundreds of other airports. One of the biggest challenges we have is, at the end of the day, given all the weather that happens, given all the chaos that ensues all around, we want to know, how did we do? Were we successful yesterday? Did we do a good job? And while that seems very simple to ask, it's very hard to answer. So I can give you answers in absolute terms, like here was our on-time performance, or here was our cancellation, the number of cancellations, or the number of misconnected passengers, but that doesn't answer the question. That doesn't tell me, did I do good? Because that doesn't take into account the context, the weather that I had to face, the factors that I had to face, the unique, all the cards that I was dealt. Those define my yesterday's operation. So before I can answer that question, I have to find a way to control for all of that noise. And that up to now has been statistically almost impossible. So what we've done is we've undertaken a huge data exercise, and AI always starts with data. And AI always starts with the unglamorous job of data engineering and data cleansing before you can do the sexy stuff. So what we had to do is we had to go and say, how do I describe yesterday from a data perspective? What was the weather? What was the forecast weather? What was the actual weather? How full were my planes? How healthy were my planes? What was my maintenance kind of out of service? How much crew time did I have? What part of the bid month were they at? All these factors. What did the air traffic control organization do? How did they respond? All of these things are factors and contextual factors that I have to capture, and I have to uniquely attribute yesterday. But once I do that, once I capture yesterday, when I can fully describe it in all these dimensions, Now I can start to apply AI to it. Now I can start to apply clustering to it. Now I can start to identify, show me a similar day to yesterday. And if I can find a similar day from a data perspective, now I can say things like, how did I do yesterday? Well, let me compare you to historically similar days when you were faced with the same conditions. Did you outperform or underperform historically similar days? That becomes a much more meaningful conversation and a useful conversation, and actually something I can use. So not only can I use that to actually grade myself, but I can actually use it to figure out how to get better, how to learn. And that's the other aspect that we've really dove into AI is how do we use it to learn? And so if I have a way to cluster similar days that have the same kind of attributes, then I can go to that cluster, that set, and say, why were some of those days when I was given the same conditions, why did some of them have really good outcomes and some of them had really bad outcomes? And the difference was the decisions I made, the strategies I employed. So now I have a systematic way to say, for this particular type of day, here are the best practices. And we can start to learn that and start to pull that out of it so we don't have to rely on purely, expertise or experience. Because one of the things that we struggled with is that through COVID, we lost a ton of expertise. A lot of experience left the door. And so we had to find a way to accelerate learning, to accelerate expertise. And through AI, that's one of the ways that we're leaning into that.
From a passenger point, is there a certain time of the day or day of the week we should know when the tickets are cheaper?
I could tell you right now, but it will change tomorrow. That is the other aspect of it, because it's also real time. What used to be a static rule that I could tell you, hey, fly here, fly there, now it's changing by the minute. And it's always adjusting to market conditions, to traffic conditions, to demand conditions, to weather conditions. It is as real time as you can get. So there are no hard and fast rules anymore. Sorry.
Well, I was going to answer it slightly differently from a commercial perspective. My usual answer to that is when everybody else isn't. Right? That's when you're usually going to get the cheapest cost. From an AI and a data science perspective in the commercial world, Tim touched upon it a little bit. Again, really what we're trying to understand, especially from a commercial side, is how many people want to fly, how often where do they want to fly, and how should we set up our schedules, and how do we set up our prices on a revenue management perspective. So from that perspective, it's really to understand the complex nature of the problem. We are not a point-to-point airline. So most of our customers are flying on what we call flow or a connecting traffic. That makes it really challenging to understand how much demand there is actually on every leg. So we actually do a lot of diving into the data to understand customer behavior. What is it that drives people to choose particular flights? Price is one of those, of course. But how do we sort of understand that when people are flowing and when those options are out there? Similarly to the operations world, there is a ton of data out there, and it's not easy to actually pick out clear signals by yourself. And that's where a lot of the more sophisticated math and the AI type tools start coming into play. That's when we start able to understand some of those signals that are out there that we wouldn't have otherwise seen. And similarly to Tim, we've lost a lot of experience over the last 4 or 5 years, and we're trying to build that back up. And these kind of tools help us sort of get that sort of initial learning curve over with as well.
Okay. For JetBlue, so in terms of AI, could you talk about long-term impact and long-term goals that JetBlue is adopting? Anything from a customer experience point of view that you can shine on how AI is taken over?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the short way to put it is AI is a key enabler of our strategic growth, period. So some of you may have heard, but we've had a couple of different strategies that we've tried lately, and several have not worked out. One of which was to acquire Spirit Airlines. The Justice Department had a different opinion on that. We also tried somewhat like a joint venture with American Airlines called the NEA. The Justice Department also did not approve of that. And so recently we've had to pivot and say, okay, well, what is our organic strategy? What does a standalone carrier look like? How do we become best at what we can do? And project a solid and robust, vibrant JetBlue in the next 5 to 10 years. And as we set forth this strategy, things come to mind like maximizing revenue, lowering costs, making sure that we are as reliable as we can, and ultimately driving customer value. And throughout each one of those pillars, AI or data science plays a key role in us being able to drive that growth. And I can tell you from an operations perspective, if you were to start an airline from scratch, and if your goal was to be a reliable carrier, you probably wouldn't put 70% of your flying in the Northeast. But that's what we have done. And so being able to drive, reliability in the most heavily congested and I would say ATC dysfunctional part of the world requires a lot of very smart people working behind the scenes to be able to, take our way through that. And so how we optimize our network, how we set up each day to be able to drive the best possible outcomes. How do we predict what ATC is going to do given the forecast and the weather, and then be able to drive the right strategies, as Tim mentioned, are incredibly important. And we have some very talented folks that run our operation on a day-to-day basis. But you just don't have the level of, you can't, as a human being leading an operation, understand all of the dynamics, all of the intricacies, every one of the variables that's going to lead to a successful outcome. And so you do have to augment that with data science. You have to augment that with tools. And that has to also feed back into the structure, the schedule, the resilience, how you crew, your airline, and how do you guard against, the risks that we face on a day-to-day basis. But in the end, data science is key to our strategy as we go forward.
Talking about the Northeast corridor, I mean, I've had my fair share getting stuck in LaGuardia with a lot of delays, but going in the last year, there has been a lot more communication from airlines, whether it's a crew, whether it's weather, and whether it is, and what do we expect in the next few hours? And I think that is something, because we understand, I think passengers understand that it is weather related. It's not a parts issue. It's not a crew issue, but sometimes we just want more communication. And I think this is where we have seen a lot of airlines push that in and make it as transparent as possible. I know United has been doing that a lot lately.
Yeah, that's actually one of the use cases we had for Gen AI, where rather than just giving the customer when there is a delay, just a code or simply saying, hey, there's storms, we actually have AI that's actually generating the text to explain the reason for the delay. And it might be somewhere where, you might be in a sunny place, the people picking you up at the airport might be in a sunny place, and you're wondering why. There's a lot of other conflicting effects that goes on, and this AI will be able to pick that up and be able to explain, here, this is the reason why your flight is late, and this is when you're expected to go.
Kevin, let's shift to Department of Defense. So when you talk about adoption in AI, could you talk about what is the biggest challenge that you're seeing at L3Harris? And what I mean by that is it technology? Is it data adoption? Is it regulation? Or is it just talent?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So it certainly covers the span of all three, and maybe I'll highlight some of the technology challenges since that's what I'm mostly interested in. All the data governance and policies are interesting too. But so I think you kind of have to understand of where we have to operate versus where commercial has to operate. We operate very much at what we call the tactile edge. So we have a lot of assets that are out, in force, forward facing, where there's a lot of electronic warfare that we have to deal with, where there's limited communications. We don't have a lot of compute power at the edge. So when you talk about training large models or even inferencing on models, we just don't have that luxury. The backhaul capability back to some of the large compute areas aren't typically there. And the data itself is, we're pretty data starved, I'll say. If you look at what we're trying to accomplish in our day-to-day missions, we're trying to pick out threats where you may only have a few examples. So how do you train a neural network on just a few examples and to be predictable and trustworthy out to the force. So, on the commercial side, they have a lot of training examples. People are always taking pictures of their cats, their dogs, and, dancing. So it's very easy to get the amount of data to have it labeled and have these technologies work in a predictable fashion where, we don't have that luxury.
When it comes to technology, we always see a lot of new technology being tested in the Department of Defense, which sometimes will make it to the commercial side. Could you comment on autonomous aircraft? How you guys are thinking about it? How far do you think it is on the commercial side? Regulatory hurdles, technological hurdles?
Yeah, it's again very interesting question. I think I think on the DoD and the Department of Defense side, I think their risk profile is much much lower or much higher, so they can take on a lot of risks because of the environment they're operating under. So if if you've seen in the news, DARPA is doing a lot with autonomous aircrafts, dogfighting. There was something called the DARPA Alpha Challenge, Alpha Dogfight Challenge, where they were pitted a autonomous F-16 against a human F-16 fighter pilot, and the autonomous system won every single time because it could adapt much quicker and use techniques that the F-16 pilot just wasn't really aware of. That we're going to take some of that technology, we're expanding it to bring it to more collaborative aircraft. So that's something that I'm researching right now is how do you have a single person to control not maybe 4 or 5, but hundreds of aircraft that are going to be out in the environment and, have them coordinate and operate in certain challenging environments. Now, if you talk about from the commercial domain, it's that risk profile again is that they're much lower threshold. You might get to see maybe unmanned aircraft doing cargo hauls or something like that. That's something that's a low risk where maybe there's still a pilot in the aircraft, maybe on the loop or maybe remotely guiding that aircraft. But it's probably not anytime soon where you're going to have a plane full of passengers with an autonomous pilot, with nobody in the loop. So that's probably way far out there, but I'll leave it to the experts.
Yeah, I think there's two things that make me believe the same thing, that it's going to be sometime. One is public trust. Having the confidence and faith that there's nobody up front that can intervene when something goes wrong. Even though the technical capabilities, are coming along fast, that public trust is going to be a big hurdle that I think will drive, time to be able to deliver that to the market. And the other thing too is our regulators. I feel that the FAA is not ahead of this one. I believe that they are going to react and be behind this one. And I think integrating autonomous flying with UAS and new entrants, along with existing commercial airspace, is going to be something that will take some time to be able to work out.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking is because we have a lot of students over here, those who are studying to be pilots. So just wanted to make sure if they should continue to become a pilot or they need to pivot. Steve, you mentioned about FAA. Let's talk about FAA a little bit more. Air traffic control management. So we understand when it comes to Northeast Corridor, there are a lot of things airlines are doing to adapt AI, but sometimes it has to be on both sides. What challenges do you see? Is FAA, especially when it comes to air traffic control management, are they open to adapting? What are the use cases they are doing? Are they slowing down things? Do you think the airline wants to move faster, but you guys are slowing down because FAA cannot catch up?
Yeah, I think so. When it comes to the challenge, and the Northeast Corridor is a good example of this. There are no new runways being built from DC up to Boston, so you have flat capacity for the foreseeable next couple decades, and you have this congestion that has to be alleviated in my opinion, two ways. One is through better staffing of our ATC facilities, which that problem's been well addressed, highlighted. There is a path to being able to do that eventually. It's just going to take some time. And then the second component is to be more efficient with the flow of traffic through this corridor as well. a lot of the next gen programs that the FAA has been piloting and spearheading for the last 2 decades have AI and in optimization in the heart of what they do. The concepts are great. The implementation is where we see challenges between funding gaps from the FAA, program management, and some of the collaboration with industry users, not just commercial aviation, but all of the other stakeholders that are involved, have fell short on us being able to deliver the real value. And quite frankly, it is frustrating from a carrier's perspective too. We do things as an airline like equip our fleet to be able to maximize the value of the airspace that is out there. But unless the entire industry, including general aviation, business traffic, along with commercial aviation, has the same level of equipage on their aircraft, you really don't get the value of the optimized use of the airspace. And so therefore we are, working with a very unoptimized, inefficient airspace that, quite frankly, we don't have a path forward in the next decade, I see, to be able to really change meaningfully.
So I can add a little bit, one kind of not so glamorous, but one kind of glamorous. The not so glamorous one is typically the FAA, when they build systems to manage the airspace, they tend to be these huge monolithic, implementations that take decades almost, and almost guarantee by the time you get to the end of them, they're obsolete. And so what, as Steve mentioned, they're starting to open up to bring in more kind of decision support, optimization, AI. And so one of the things they're starting to think through is with the next generation of systems to manage ATC is to take a much different software development approach. Instead of going monolithic, instead of going waterfall, start to chunk it up, start to build more microservices, start to be more modular so I can start to build functionality in bite-sized pieces. And so I can actually get capabilities sooner and actually replace it easier than what they are right now. So that's one thing that gives me a little bit of hope for kind of the next generation of these systems, because all of them are kind of going to go through a major overhaul and rewrite. The other thing is, one of the pieces of research that I am involved with is I'm actually trying to take advantage of technology like ChatGPT for ATC. And they even called it, Chat ATC. Because one of the things that is very challenging is, the ATC domain is very kind of domain specific in terms of terminology, phraseology, wording, conversations. It's also very rigid and it's hard, and it requires a lot of training, a lot of on-the-job, training. But even for those folks, by the moment that they just start doing their job, it almost becomes stale because the rest of the industry continues to evolve. And so one of the things that this research is looking at is saying, look at the last 10 years of ATC responses to everything, weather, volume, demand, and can we start to learn and understand and actually create an environment where a controller could potentially, not from a separation of aircraft perspective, but more from a strategic perspective, to say, here are the conditions that I'm facing, here's the weather forecast that I'm looking at, what are my options, what should I do given everything that's happening right now? And so things like, what's the appropriate traffic management initiative, a ground stop, a ground delay program, an airspace flow program, miles and trail, structured routing, all of these tools and techniques they have at their disposal, but everybody utilizes them in a different form or fashion. But even if once I decide on the right strategy is, there's a ton of implementation details. What's the rate profile? When do I start? What's the scope of it? When do I pull out of it? All these things, what's the right combination, are all left to subject matter, just kind of decisions. They're very subjective. So there's a lot of opportunities to really dig into that domain to actually augment, this very complex environment to come up with more consistent and more efficient responses to congestion.
It also sounds like there's an opportunity from a consulting point to the FAA then. Well, you guys see an empty chair. So my colleague, Alfredo, who was going to be here, he is running late because his flight was delayed. So he was supposed to arrive at 11
I could have predicted
o'clock.
that.
And I was joking with him that he should have used AI to figure out the probability of this delay, which he said he did, but yet it was delayed. So he should be coming in soon. Um, Joseph, let's switch to, I think one of the fears people talk about is how AI will replace our jobs. I was talking to a couple of students earlier today, and I was saying, look, anytime when there is a new technology, some jobs will be replaced, but new jobs would be created. So is there an example where you say how United has used AI to augment human decision making and not necessarily replace it?
I think the example that I gave you earlier regarding our messaging back to the customers, we actually had a team who was actually doing that. Could never actually catch up to the number of flights that are out there. We have 5,000 plus flights every day. This is one of those spaces where when the data is a little bit hazy and you can't really get something from a chat GPT type of answer to it, this is where that human experience, the business knowledge to actually dive in and understand what's actually going on with that flight can give you a little bit better. So this gives them the bandwidth to actually not focus on the more straightforward ones, but the ones that really require that second, third level sort of deep dive into what's going on, be able to explain. So that's a good example of one where it's not necessarily where it's replacing your job. It's actually giving you the bandwidth to do some of the more complex stuff where the humans are still really good at.
Okay. The next question, Tim, maybe you or Kevin. To the extent, look, at the end of the day, the panel over here, they want to get jobs. And we will talk about what they should be training for by the time they graduate. But one thing I struggled with when I was a student, there were so many companies that I didn't even know about that existed. We only know, students only are exposed to the companies that come to career services. Everybody wants to work for Lockheed, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, you just name it, the big ones. And one thing I keep saying is there are so many other companies out there, they might be better suited for what you guys are looking for. So my question is, from an AI, could you talk about other companies, other technology companies that American works with? Any names that comes to your mind that students should be looking into? Or is it that American just does everything in-house and everything is homegrown?
No, definitely not all homegrown. We collaborate with a lot of external companies, especially in this domain, because we know that if we do it all in-house, we're going to be behind the curve. So we want to partner with those folks that will keep us ahead of the curve. And so we do a lot of work. I personally work with MITRE, the MITRE Corporation. They are heavily into this, and they have, they do all sorts of industries, Department of Defense, aviation, air traffic control. They tremendous work there. We also work with NASA. NASA, the second A in NASA is aeronautics. They do a lot in the aviation area around data science, and they're leaning into it. And we're involved with at least 2 or 3 different operational demonstrations with NASA that relate to data science. And even in data science, they have even a lot of student challenges that they routinely promote. And so this is an opportunity to get your hands dirty on a project with real data, with real kind of use cases that actually have good applicability. We also work with, maybe non-traditional AI companies, but they are now the weather company. Weather forecasting is hugely leaning into AI, expanding what used to be primarily reliance on physical weather models to augment that with AI models to actually improve the fidelity of their forecasts. And so we're working with them to take what traditionally has been a point forecast and have them look at probabilistic forecasts, to not just look at a specific forecast for what is the range of likely opportunity or outcomes tomorrow, and give me a probability of each occurring. So there's just a couple of them that we work with, and we also work with consultants, and so, but even internally, at American, we probably have I would say about 100, 150 data scientists that are kind of throughout the company in one form or fashion. And they do different aspects of it, but it's a very kind of rich area across a number of different industries.
Anyone else who, Kevin, maybe?
Yeah. So, who here has like an entrepreneurial spirit? Anybody want to do a startup? Who wants to yeah, a few people. All right. I think it's an opportune time right now to go into business with yourself, have a startup. I mean, there's a lot of money in venture capitalist funding, both on the commercial side and on the DoD side. So we really look hard at dual use technology. So within L3 Harris, we're partnered with a VC fund called Shield Capital. I'm part of the board there that reviews a lot of the startups that come through our pathway to evaluate them and to see if we want to invest in them or even collaborate with them to bring their technology into our workforce. I think within the past, I want to say probably past 6 months or so, I think we've reviewed 2,000 companies, and invested in a significant amount of those companies. So we have a pretty deep portfolio of some really discriminating technologies that we can bring to bear. And I think that's why, I like to say, and we like to say at O3 Harris, we are the trusted disruptor because we really like to partner with a lot of these companies where we just don't have the skills or the capability, or the know-how in order to bring a lot of these technologies to bear. So we'll bring them within our own centers and our own communication systems and integrate them and show them how to work with the DoD because it's very difficult to work for the DoD. So for anybody who's thinking about it, you can talk to me and I'll tell you how difficult it is, but it's probably another conversation. But yeah, we are always partnering with what we call the best of breed to bring in that technology in-house.
Maybe just something I'll add to that too, because it reminded me of a lot of carriers and a lot of companies, for that matter, have parts of their organization looking at startups. So we have a part of JetBlue is JetBlue Tech Ventures. It's actually a subsidiary of ours. It's a very small group. They're based in Silicon Valley, and they invest in startups that have an aviation focus that we believe at some point could benefit JetBlue or the broader sector, and we'll either make money on the equity of that investment, or we will benefit from being able to utilize that technology once it matures. And the vast majority of investments that we've made to date have been in companies that have some way, shape, or form data science component that's aviation related.
Cool. Okay. Let's switch to the future of AI and how do we prepare for it. So given there are students here graduating anywhere from this December to 3 years out or 4 years out, can you talk about, and this is open to anyone, can you guys talk about what is the future of AI and how do the students best prepare for it when they graduate?
I can start, maybe. I think first thing is not to be scared of it. I really do think we should think about it more of as a tool as opposed to a replacement. And it's like any other tool that we came up with 10, 15, 20 years ago. It is definitely give us new opportunities. So I think what the key part that everybody has to sort of keep in mind is understanding the business or the business problems and how we utilize the right tools to solve those problems. That is not something that the AI or a Gen AI can actually just take over. I think the value that we bring in as people who work with data, people work with building the models, et cetera, is understanding that business and then leveraging the right tools like AI to actually go solve that. So to be open to actually looking at it as a new tool as opposed to just something that replaces you.
But do you see the job market changing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know when I started, a lot of it was coding, understanding coding, et cetera. I think that still stays when you're talking about data science, but it's less about the coding itself and about the ideas that you want coded and how you actually get the models to sort of think about those ideas. It's probably many, many, many years, generations away before the science of what we do is actually built into that AI. So at least for the interim time, we have to understand the science and see how that can be leveraged rather than expecting an AI model to actually just do it for you. You can't just give it a problem and do it. Even though we have a ton of data, you still have to figure out what to do with that data. And that's the kind of guidance I think we have to give.
You know, from my perspective, it's not necessarily the future of AI, but it's the future of those analysts that will work with AI, that we're going through an exercise at American of kind of reclassifying and restructuring. Who are we looking for? Gone are really these, traditional reporting and analysis teams. Business analytics teams are replacing those. And so those are the people that we expect to come in with an analytics kind of capability and mindset. You can do some data engineering. You can do some data visualization. You can do some scripting, whether it be Python or whether it be, Databricks or some sort of notebooking. That's becoming almost the default to say, how do you work and engage with data and that you're data curious and that you're really wanting to dig into it and ask questions about it. That is becoming kind of a standard skill set that we're looking for across the airline. So you come in with that, you out of the box, you're going to be competitive. And then we're also looking for those folks that want to go deeper into the methodologies, those folks that are interested in going deeper into the operations research, the data science, the large language models that are underneath this technology, to extend those, to know how do we deploy them in a industry environment at scale. How do we ensure that they're properly calibrated? How do we ensure that they don't drift? There's all these things. It's easy to apply them. How do you make sure that they're sustainable and they're done in the right way? And there's also a whole industry that's built around how do you build the safeguards around some of these future technologies like large language models? I mean, we have a whole, you talked about one of the barriers to AI or one of the resistance. For us, it's the lawyers. They're scared to death of AI at American because of the fact that there's a potential for data leakage if we're not careful. There's a potential for code creation to come in that actually has a security vulnerability to it, that if you're not aware of it, you could be introducing risk into your environment from a cybersecurity perspective. So there's going to be need for how do you build these guardrails around this technology so that it serves us, but doesn't introduce risk that we have to, will actually end up causing harm. So.
Yeah. Just for the students, those who are leaving for a class, from what I've told is you guys are excused not to attend the class if you have a class at 4 o'clock. And if you run into trouble, just let me know. Yes. We have College of Engineering, College of Aviation, College of Business here. The deans are here. So to me, this is more of a learning than what you guys are going to learn in the classroom. So let's talk about how AI can enhance education and learning experience in the classrooms. Is there any use cases you guys like? What can the professors adopt?
What can the professors adopt?
Correct. Like how can professors use AI to enhance education and learning?
That's a good question. I think part of that also is a little bit to what I mentioned before. How do we sort of step into sort of the new technologies that are out there to understand sort of what drives them? The successful students who are going to come out are not going to be the ones necessarily who can use those tools or only use those tools. It's those who use them and understand how they work to the extent you can understand it. And so if some of that can be taught in the classroom, sort of that basic sort of foundation where you don't just trust what the model spits out, but to understand why it's actually spitting that out, to learn that and to be able to learn how to question those sort of foundations, I think that would be very important.
I'd say a little bit of a tangent from the question, and it's been a while since I've been in the classroom, so I may not be the best equipped to answer this, but change management has been something that I think is overlooked and incredibly important in the business. Okay, we've got a lot of folks, as I mentioned earlier, that have been working at airlines for decades and recently are now exposed to tools and information and ways in which they will do their job very differently than how they've done in the past. And that's not easy, especially when it's a black box telling you, your option is X instead of what you had traditionally done is Y. So how we walk into that and how we approach change management, at least on the business side, is extremely important. And I would say that from the education perspective, I would venture to guess that it's the same. That this technology it's not going anywhere. It's going to be around. We have to embrace it, but doing so in a way that really understands how, AI can enhance the student experience, how AI can make, from the educator's perspective, the job more efficient, I think is extremely important, but it has to be done with intent and design and purpose. Otherwise, I think, what we've found in the business is that, we can't just put something out there and expect our team to use it. We've got to have a real, focus and strategy on making sure that execution and that benefit is, succeeds.
For the students, those students and faculty, those who are interested in AI, what is the promising research they should explore into over the next couple of years?
So I guess I'll start a little bit. So I think there's still a lot of challenges around reasoning. I think for those who've used ChatGPT, certainly can understand, that it's still very nascent in its ability to properly reason. We hear about hallucinations, things in that context, just because of its autoregressive nature of how it is just predicting the next token. It's not really understanding what it's trying to accomplish. So it has no model of the world. For us, we have an understanding of the world. We understand how physics works. We understand how nature works, how humans react. In large language models, it's just trying to take the data that it's trained on and then predict the next piece. So certainly reasoning is a large part of that. There's some interesting research now from Jan LeCun. He's from Meta. I think it's called energy-based methodologies. Certainly, I encourage you to look up some of the research papers in there. That's definitely not a solved problem. And I think it's probably going to be needed if we're going to have full self-driving cars, despite what Elon thinks, because he's always saying that full self-driving is next year. I think we're still quite a ways away because we're lacking some of the understanding and the underlying kinematics and other features. The second piece is hierarchical planning. So it's a very challenging problem. This has to do with, so I'll give you an example. Today I woke up, I went to my car, drove to work, I drove here, and now I'm at the panel. If you kind of break that down a little bit further, I opened my eyes, I moved my body, I placed it so my feet were on the ground, and I started to walk. You take it another step further, and the neurons in my brain who are synaptically connected that sent electrochemical brain signals to my eyes to wake. So you can go further and further. That's very fundamental if we want to start looking at, generic or general artificial intelligence and how robotics work and can operate in the environment. So that's very technical. There's a whole, other areas that can be explored as well.
And I would add, in addition to the technical, I think taking on to what Steve said, the change management, I see a lot of research being done around the interface, the human machine interface. How do you connect this technology to decision makers in a variety, in a diverse array of environments? So for example, one of the use cases that we have at American is with our mechanics. We're out in the field fixing aircraft, turning wrenches, and we're trying to introduce technology to say, what's the best way to figure out this problem? One of the things that we found is that when we have a problem on an aircraft, if they don't fix it the first time, if they're troubleshooting and they try something that doesn't work, the amount of time that stays broken doubles. from on average, 4 days to 8 days. That's an incredible amount of additional maintenance that just is not being addressed. And you're ordering parts. Typically our mechanics are like the Home Depot homeowner who's going to basically say, hey, I'm going to fix my plumbing. I don't know exactly what I need, so I'm going to buy one of everything. And when you have hundreds of mechanics all over the system buying and ordering one of everything because they don't know exactly what they need, that's millions and millions of dollars of parts inventory that are floating throughout the system unnecessarily because they just don't know. So we're actually looking at years of kind of mechanic logs of what worked, what was the corrective action. The aircraft manufacturers will tell you, hey, to do this, you do this, and this is the fix. But a lot of times the second step or the third step is replace this very expensive component. And that's not always an option. Sometimes the right solution is to be a little bit more creative. And what we've seen is that we can not just be generic, we can be tail specific, aircraft specific to say, what was done on this aircraft? What were the conditions at this flow? What was tried prior? Here's what I would suggest as your next troubleshooting, but that gets back to this interface. How do you interface that with a mechanic in the field, trying to fix an aircraft? Are they going to wear goggles? Are they going to carry a tablet? Are they going to talk to a device? What is the most effective way to create that interface to harness this technology for a real business problem? That's an open question.
I'm looking at Hervé over here sitting, who's, I know he's going to have a question later on, but he works for United. And in a prior class, we were talking about how they are looking at aircraft problems on a tail by tail basis and predicting what is the problem that this particular tail is going to fail versus the fleet wide, which used to be the old way of doing things. Okay, I have a few rapid fire questions. After that, we are going to open up for questions. So shout out any which way you guys want to. Personal or work-life problem you want AI to solve?
Extend my lifetime.
Automate meetings.
Automate memes, okay?
Laundry and dishes.
Get my kids to answer properly.
Okay. Biggest misconception about AI?
It'll turn into Skynet.
Okay.
That it knows the answer to everything.
Yeah, that it's going to take everyone's jobs.
Okay, that's a good one. Yeah. How many in the audience, how many of you do not use ChatGPT? Oh, quite a few. Okay. All right, that's 5. AI in 3 words.
Say, can't handle outliers.
Can't handle outliers. Okay.
Tool for the future.
Okay. Favorite AI tool or app?
I use ChatGPT a lot.
I actually like perplexity.ai because it actually comes with footnotes and a little bit more source and it has some more recent information.
Yeah. Favorite app?
I was going to say we have our own Chat GPT at United, so
Okay.
that's the one I use.
Got it.
United Chat GPT.
I'm a developer, so I use like TensorFlow.
Next biggest breakthrough in aviation and AI?
And AI?
Within AI.
Honestly, I think once, and we're getting closer, quantum computing is there with AI, the types of problems that we'll be able to solve or actually even consider will be a step change for us.
Anyone else? Yeah.
Elon Musk buys an airliner. Is that
Well, he's investing in Wi-Fi, so maybe that's nice. Maybe that's how he's going to control it. All right. Why don't we open up for questions?
So I know it's probably going to be a while until we have fully autonomous airliners, but there have been talks of perhaps removing the co-pilot from planes. How long do you think that that would be happening if it is to happen?
That's really tough to say. I think in the U.S. industry, it's going to be quite some time. I would say that the DoD is probably leading the charge. There could be some foreign carriers and some foreign regulators that are more open to this, but I think it's going to be military first, and then at some point it's going to spill into the commercial realm. But it probably will not be in the United States first. It's really hard to say.
All right, so this is louder than I thought. You guys talked about using some off-the-shelf AI models for like the companies. How does that work with licensing and then the privacy of, the data that you guys have?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've actually done is that we have a partnership with Microsoft. So we actually, by virtue of that partnership, we actually have access to some of the underlying libraries behind OpenAI that we can kind of self-contained. And so that's where our lawyers get really nervous is that anything gets exposed. So we can't actually interact with any of these using company emails, because anything we ask becomes public domain almost by default. And that gets really tricky really fast. And so kind of like, United, we're having to create our own kind of ecosystem that we can learn and build or find ways to safely harvest the broader ecosystem of data. But that's definitely an open question.
Gotcha.
And if I can add, that's actually the reason why we developed United ChatGPT, because we did not want to expose internal or customer data.
Yeah, we have to deal with other challenges when we talk about the Defense Department because, you can take two pieces of unclassified information and then combine them and suddenly they become classified just due to the association with the various pieces. So for us, we have to take that in consideration for extra precautions.
And I mentioned it before, but one of the really concerns we do have is with automatic code generation, because that's very common now. People can use that very effectively, but there is some susceptibility to that you could introduce vulnerability and security risks by accepting code that's not really yours, that you just kind of, oh, it works, And so we're having to add different layers on top of any code that gets, incorporated into our kind of environment to ensure that it doesn't have some of those vulnerabilities and security risks. So it's not just the text and information, it's also the code that gets generated.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for coming today. I'm Anise, and I'm doing my MS in Analytics, Aerospace Business Analytics. The question I have is around the data. It is not something that I can hold and say it's my area or it's my place and keep it securely. When I am an organization, when making decisions every day, and I'm so interconnected with different organizations or different departments or teams and many people at the same time, how would an event like recent Microsoft has had about like everything was like paused for some time, how would you think that would affect to an organization, and how are we prepared? And do we have any models that can predict events like Microsoft had or events like COVID-19? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of the work will need to be done. I think the technology sometimes gets ahead of itself, but the less glamorous work of how do you create those safe guardrails around it and to use it safely and effectively is still not completely there, and that's why we tend to take a little bit cautious approach. Now we're all into a cloud environment now. We've made that kind of digital transformation, so that creates an ability to kind of create policies and in fact, enact guidelines that are easier because we have Now we're starting to introduce, standardization, and standard practices and standard software and standard packages that everybody uses within that same environment. And that starts to help with some of those challenges.
You had a question? Yeah. Want to just take the mic? Yeah. I think for the panelists, do me a favor, introduce yourself, identify if you are a student, faculty, or a board member, and if you're a student, then what are you studying and which year you are in?
All right. Yeah, I'm a student. I'm a computer engineering major in my senior year. So I have a question about human level intelligence. I've seen a lot of estimations ranging from 2029 to 2045 about the time that AI will reach human level intelligence. And whenever that happens, how do you think that'll affect the industry?
Kevin, sounds like this would be you.
So when anybody gives a prediction that's usually 10 years or more out, means is that they have no idea when it's actually going to occur. Yeah, I think we've kind of got a glimpse of that a little bit with ChatGPT, and by no means is ChatGPT anywhere near kind of the human level intelligence that we think it is, or artificial general intelligence. But I think you will see, differences in what we can actually do in terms of, full self-driving cars. We talk about, airliners. I think it's going to have a huge impact. Now, to what impact? It's a good question. I mean, I think so. I'll say that I think there's some disruptions coming just in the near term, just from ChatGPT and from the technologies that we're seeing from generative AI. The first wave was, I don't know if people remember Napster. Anybody remember Napster? Okay, I'm not dating myself too much, right? So that kind of disrupted the music industry. I think the second one was YouTube with streaming, so that kind of disrupted, the television and entertainment industry. I think the third one that's coming is the movie industry. I think you're going to start seeing people generate movies from generative AI, such as, ChatGPT. They're going to write their script into ChatGPT, and it's going to create the characters and animate them and generate, very rich movies. And I think that's going to have a huge impact in the movie industry. So start your creative consciousness now.
There's going to be a lot more really bad movies out there.
Yeah. Exactly.
I would also think this is a moving target too, right? Because it's based on where you people think how much % of our brain power we use today. So I would think that humans would be using a lot more brain power 20 years from now, 30 years from now. So it becomes a moving target. So, yeah. All right, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Chandresh. I'm Hervé Lavenant, a board member. We know AI is prone to hallucination, and a lot of you have hinted implicitly how to avoid hallucination without being too explicit about how to handle it. And I think it's important for the students to know how to avoid hallucination. Can you detail this a little bit more? In Gen AI, that is.
Yeah, so with Gen AI, most of the business use cases that we've had and continue to see are with more traditional AI, machine learning and such. Gen AI, for us, we're experimenting with a couple different things. One of which, it's pretty simple. We have manuals. We have flight operations manuals. We have dispatch manuals. We have maintenance procedures manuals. We have tens of thousands of pages of manuals that our teams use and are expected to follow and adhere. And the ability to just get answers quickly, whether it's in reference to a problem that is time sensitive or what, we feel that there's a great opportunity with Gen AI to be able to help that. As we've built up our prototypes to be able to tee this up to the users, we want to make absolutely certain that there's no hallucinations, especially in a safety and a regulatory environment. One of the simple ways that we've done this is just create a hyperlink to the actual document with the actual text every time answers are teed up. so that as we're testing this, we're also ensuring that we have the actual manuals and the actual policies side by side, and that, if there are already hallucinations or, false narratives that are spit out, that we can identify those quickly and be able to identify, what tripped the bad result.
At the end of the day, we are humans, and that's what we do.
I can try to answer that. So, my team, we hired 6 or 7 PhD level stats and OR people in the last year. From our experience, the type of work that we do, it used to take us 2 to 3 years to get somebody trained up in the business areas to understand the types of problems that they needed to solve. We're now using more modern analytic tools and AI to some extent to help shorten that curve. Because really, again, as I mentioned, the business problems themselves, you have to dive into the data, you have to look at the data, et cetera. That speeds up a lot more with the tools that we have now than what it used to. And so you can start asking the questions. You can see, do the research a lot faster than what we were able to do before to be able to build up that. So that's one area where I think it helps the students and it helps new individuals coming into the team. Airlines very complex, so this helps speed up that sort of process to understand what's going on underneath. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think one of the aspects of that I would encourage is internships, because that will actually put you into an environment where just access to ChatGPT isn't enough. Where now you're having to work on a problem and actually get in front of a human and convince them that this isn't garbage. And if you can't, then it's garbage. It doesn't matter how, and so getting you into a real world environment where you start to understand there's value to being able to understand a little bit of the background, to be able to explain and translate that solution, that technology, whatever it is, to a person in a way that is persuasive. And that is something that will not be able to be replicated. And I even think that one of the things that ChatGPT or larger, they're not good at ambiguity. They're not good at the right side of the brain that deals with uncertainty, that deals with, those are the things that we as humans can hold, things that are ambiguous, things that are vague, things that are uncertain, that, maybe that becomes part of where we add value too. And we have to lean into that a little bit more, along with the human factors, along with the behavioral science, along with a lot of these things, and I was joking about the laundry and dishes, but I don't want ChatGPT to write and draw. I want to write and draw, and so let it do the things that I don't want to do. But, we as humans have to figure out what that looks like and how to make that work in our personal lives and professional lives.
So I think we're at a little bit of a tipping point when it comes to education. Right now, we're tackling the problem very tactically, but I think we need to take more of a strategic and broader approach. And a lot of the foundational abilities should be maybe pushed down to, younger ages or at a lower grade level, so that as they, learn the mechanics and the foundation, when they get to a more advanced education, now they can properly use these tools to their advantage and really answer the hard problems. So, and I think you'll start to see that. I mean, when I was going to school, and again, I'm dating myself here. I think calculus didn't come to me until it was, I don't know, 9th or 10th grade or somewhere around there. And I think they're teaching calculus much earlier. So I think you're going to probably see a lot of those foundational capabilities being pushed down on the educational level.
Yeah, I mean, if I may comment, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's in my prior class, I was saying AI is a tool, it's not a solution. And if you're using it as a solution, you will hit a wall and you will get exposed. When it comes to work, there are a lot of people, they will give us a solution, but when you ask them to explain it, and shame on them. I'm not trying to problem solve from a teaching point, but maybe the answer could be is if you write stellar essays, part of the grade needs to be how you communicate and explain that essay in front of the class and let the class ask those questions. And maybe 20% of the grade or 30% of the grade is. And the people, those who are not good, then they will fail, because you also don't want to have students coming out that they are only using AI as a solution and not necessarily as a tool. And I tell my kids, you have to learn the hard way, and then only you can learn the easy way to make it efficient. So there is an efficiency play and not necessarily the solution play. So, yes.
Hello, I'm Tyler Mutar. I'm a junior studying supply chain management. My question is, do you believe regulations or rules of regulation are holding back the development of AI? And do you think these rules of regulation has to be strengthened or loosened for the benefit of the commercial aviation industry?
I actually don't think there's many rules or regulations, which is the concern, that this is like the Wild West. And as a result, there could be, I think as Tim articulated, a lot of unintended risk and consequences to the enterprise. I think when it comes to rules and regulations, it's internal. It's how do we, evaluate our own risk and how do we manage that through policies and through different avenues that we use to safeguard our data, safeguard, the technology. I think that's the concern, is that it is very much, no man's land right now when it comes to regulation.
Hello. First of all, thank you guys for coming into the university. You guys are definitely help us become a very smart university, I guess. The question I want to make, already Mr. Tim touched a little bit on. I want to know a little bit more about the usage or the hands-ons that you guys are implemented into your strategies. I'm more into the sales and strategy world. So I want to know how you guys are using AI for fleet optimization, field planning, route planning, sales, intervals of ownership. I want to know if you guys are using AI for that, because I think that's a big part of your operation, of course.
I know you answered it, Tim, but let me try it. We do actually use that a lot. As I mentioned before, really understanding where people want to fly is not easy to get to because the data that we have, everybody has, is biased. And to understand where we should be flying takes a lot of sort of analytics to sort of peel that out. And especially in the RM side, but even in the network side, the understanding customer behavior of why people choose certain flights or certain markets is a very hard thing to try to get to. And we're just really at the sort of the start of that sort of journey ourselves.
Yeah, one thing that's a little bit different in terms of answering the question is what I think large enterprises sometimes struggle with is the prioritization of what they work on. So it's not like, JetBlue is not American Airlines. We don't have armies of data scientists. So what we focus on and what they work on has to be the most important work that we can do right now at this time. And so that prioritization and that exercise is not easy. How do you quantify? It's easier on the commercial side where we can quantify the revenue gained from better targeted ancillary sales or route optimization and so forth. It's much harder on the operations side to be able to quantify the value for which you're investing in the operation. How much are you going to save in terms of costs? What does a happy customer bring in terms of long-term value for the airline? That's not an easy answer. And so it's also something on the business side, what we struggle with is how do we make sure that we have a good case so that when we go to bat for the resources to be able to work on one problem versus another, again, we can look ourselves, straight in the face and understand that we're working on the most important things that need to be worked on at this time. And that's something that goes in parallel with, all of the, opportunities when it comes to AI.
Any final questions? Oh, there. I just passed. You mind just passing them? Oh.
Hi, my name is Gavin Selkirk. I'm an aviation maintenance science student. And this past summer, I did an internship at Alaska Airlines in maintenance op safety. And my question is, Alaska Airlines uses maintenance planning software that uses AI to plan their maintenance out, whether it be the infinite puzzle of predictive maintenance, unpredicted maintenance, ADs, engineering controls. I just wanted to know what your respective organizations are doing in terms of maintenance planning and integration of AI.
Yeah, so that's actually been a little bit of my life for the past short period. I've been immersed in maintenance. So I talked a little bit about predictive maintenance. There's a couple different aspects to it. One is identifying failure before they occur. Can I, from the sensor data, from all the history data, can I predict the next time that some component is going to fail and kind of preemptively repair it, replace it, and so forth. But even then, so that's one aspect. And there's a ton of work being done, especially at the airline manufacturer, aircraft manufacturer, that we leverage. But there's also this other case, once something breaks, how do I fix it? That's also where we're bringing in AI. We're bringing in a lot of natural language processing to look at years of what was working, what didn't work, what has been tried, what has not been tried. How do we find the next best action? And that occurs throughout our system hundreds and hundreds of times every day. And then there's more of the maintenance plan. How often should I plan maintenance? How frequent should I plan maintenance? Should I target yield? Should I target, what should be my metric, for when do I do my maintenance? If I do it too often, then I'm not efficient. How many times should you change your oil, to prolong, the life of your car or to prevent something catastrophic? So it is being used, and in even looking at the long term, one of the things that we're looking in right now is to say we need to expand our aperture about maintenance health, not just what's happening right now, today or this week or this month, but what's coming down the road 5 years from now. In terms of when is our fleet going to really spike in terms of maybe some expected needs that we can't foresee because we're fighting the fires right in front of us. How do we start to buy down some of that risk in the future to create a more resilient, more reliable fleet health so that we can prevent some of the reactive natures that are a lot more expensive and a lot more disruptive to the operation? So maintenance, and Steve and I were just talking about this before, maintenance is a gold mine for, I think, a lot of AI and data science right now. And it's one that traditionally in the aviation industry has, I think, kind of been left out. It's been kind of its own little world, but not anymore. So I'm glad you're in it.
Yeah, I think it's been in somewhat of an analog field within a lot of carriers for quite a bit of time. And I think even just getting to the point of especially predictive or preventative maintenance where you're using sensor data on the aircraft to then maybe proactively replace a part that isn't broken yet, but it's indicating that it could break sometime soon. To be able to do that, you have to have real-time data streaming from the aircraft, which, in many cases doesn't exist. In some cases, aircraft at certain intervals, there's a card that's stuck on the aircraft and they download what's called the DFTU download to be able to take that data and then process that. Well, investing in the technology to be able to stream that information in real time takes a lot of money. And when you have a very large fleet, that's a very big investment. And so having that be the enabler to then pivot into a use case that then generates an ROI, these are really big strategic decisions that, airlines that, don't have in many cases a lot of money laying around to be able to invest in have to think very carefully on. But I agree, the world of tech ops within commercial aviation is definitely a gold mine and something that airlines are pursuing very quickly.
Maybe we should all invest in Starlink.
Maybe.
I just don't want to stop everyone, but I do want to say thank you. I want to thank our panel. I want to thank our students, our faculty and staff. You guys did a great job. You brought this home for everything from maintenance to business to air traffic control to engineering to data science. Have I forgotten anything? If there's something somebody studies on this campus that they haven't talked about, tell me what it was, because I missed it. But I hope you've enjoyed. They're going to break down this room on us in a few minutes, which is why I'm interjecting. But I would love it if you'd stay at the front and let students come and mingle. Thank you. Can we show our appreciation to our panelists, please?